A very brief, your name, where you're from, if you teach, what you teach, what school, and half a sentence about your connection with Inside Out or your history with Inside Out. Really, really brief, so we don't, take up too much time. So Joe, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Joe Schwartz. I'm from Philadelphia. I was an Inside student in 2014. Since I've been home from prison, I have been involved with Inside Out as a training institute instructor, and it's good to be here.
Okay, good to see you, Joe. Randall?
I did the training way back, Randall Gromenstein, Fitchburg State University in Massachusetts. Fitchburg is a little bit north of Worcester. And I did the training back in 2005, and finally I'm getting around to actually trying to set up a course. Only a small delay.
Okay. You might want to work on your volume, because a little bit hard to hear you.
Okay, I'll work on that.
Kaden.
Hi, everyone. Kaden Paulson-Smith. I'm an assistant teaching professor at UMass Dartmouth, and I took the Inside Out training, I think, in 2020, beginning of the lockdown.
Okay, good to see you. Cora Lynn.
Hi, I'm Cora Lynn Davis. I'm at Bucknell University. I was an Inside Out instructor for a number of years at SCI Muncie, and I currently sit on the steering committee of the PA Consortium for Higher Education in Prison, along with Joe.
Okay. Good to see you. Stephen?
Steve Sims, Bridgewater State University in Massachusetts. I've taught Inside Out in county jail and a medium security prison, I think like 5 times. And I teach in the criminal justice department of Bridgewater.
Okay.
Trying to keep it succinct.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Susan?
Hi, Susan Clampett-Lundquist. I'm in the Department of Sociology at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. And I went through the Inside Out training in 2007 and have been trying to teach a class at least once a year ever since.
It's a lot of years. Wow. Teresa?
Hi, I'm Tressa Leopold. I teach sociology at Lake Superior College in Duluth. I did training in the summer of 2010, and I've taught 20 plus Inside Out classes since then at 2 different facilities, most recently the federal prison camp here in Duluth.
Cool. Good to see you. Thank you. Tori?
Hello, my name is Tori Price from Michigan. I took Inside Out as an Inside student in 2014 with the University of Michigan. Did some Inside Out research last year as a fellow, and currently a trainer, just as Joe is. And I work for Michigan Collaborative to End Mass Incarceration. So today's a good topic, talking about Pell Grants and some of the work we're doing here in Michigan.
Hello, Tori. Okay. Shizan, did I say that right?
Zishan, yes. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good. Okay. We have 7 hours difference. I'm out of the country. I teach at the New School University. I attended the programs 2008, and since then I have been teaching at Sing Sing and Arthur Kill facilities, and also Metropolitan Correctional Facilities. And also I teach acting and directing classes related to mass incarceration. And I have not been teaching since pandemic Inside classes.
Okay. Wow. It's been a lot of years. I haven't seen you in a while.
Me too. Yes, great to see you, Laurie.
Thank you. Calenthia, same here. I haven't seen you in a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while. Hi, I'm Calenthia, and I took the Inside Out class. I think it was the last in-person, maybe, before the pandemic, 2019 at Arcadia. Yeah, I think that's it. And then at that time, I was teaching at Eastern University. Again, I haven't taught in person since the pandemic either. I'm teaching online at the University of Montana, and in the AFM Studies program, as well as working with a nonprofit in Philly. And yeah, I thought I had time today, and I thought I'd check in and
Great.
see what's happening. Thanks.
Okay. See ya. Thank you. Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. I'm Sarah Wolking. I teach at the University of Florida Levin College of Law. And I did the training a year or two ago with Lori and Joe and Tori. It's nice to see you guys. And I'm launching my first Inside Out class next month at Lancaster State Prison in Trenton, Florida.
All right. That's exciting. You have to get back to us and tell us how it went. Or how it's going. Shoshana.
Hello, my name is Shoshana Lucas. I am the chair of the Criminology and Criminal Justice Department at Cal Lutheran University in Southern California. And I got trained in 2016. I've taught 5 Inside Out courses at the local jail, day reporting center, and I'm starting a new one at a juvenile facility with 18 to 25-year-old students in this semester or next semester. And then I'm also a co-facilitator, just became one, did my first training with Lori recently. So that was exciting.
Very recent, last week.
I know.
Have you recovered yet?
I'm getting there. It's good though. So yeah.
And she was great. Nigel.
Nigel Boyle, Pittsburgh College in Southern California. I first got trained in 2015 and have taught intermittently since then. We have a BA program based on Inside Out curriculum here, but one that does not yet use Pell.
Okay. Paul. So you're on your iPhone. Can we see you?
I'm in my car, so maybe not a good idea. But this is Paul Draus, University of Michigan, Dearborn, and Dearborn, just outside of Detroit. I've been teaching Inside Out classes since 2008. It's sociology.
Okay. Good to hear your voice, Paul.
You too.
Trip.
Yeah, I'll have to apologize as well. My webcam went out this morning, so I just ordered a new one. So I've was an Inside student for 2 semesters through the University of Idaho, Dr. Omi Hodwitz, and then I TA'd for 2 semesters. I am currently working for the nonprofit FICGN to help build out the world of higher education in prison and help with reentry as well.
And I just heard about that program a couple minutes ago, so we'll have to talk.
Yes, please.
Okay. Anne.
Hi, everybody. My name's Anne. I work through the Inside Out Center, mainly in the greater Philadelphia area, helping to coordinate courses, talk to instructors, provide information, but also monitor what's going around for Inside Out in the state. And working with a new collaborative that is focusing on prison education programs, a number of universities working on Pell projects, but also Inside Out programs.
And you and Coraline and Joe work together on that consortium.
Right.
Okay. All right. Did I miss anybody? Okay. Ashley. So Ashley is going to be facilitating today. Ashley, I'm going to let you do your own introduction and take us where you're going to take us.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I have a formal introduction via PowerPoint slides, so I'll save it, but a few of you look very familiar. So Tori, I actually think I met you back in 2019 in Michigan. So it's nice to see you again. And then we also have a lot of Massachusetts people here. So hi to all my Massachusetts people. I am also in Massachusetts. So I'm going to share my screen. So how I would love to do this. I see this really as a conversation, but for the first 20 minutes, I'm just going to do a little bit of, I don't want to say lecturing, but walking us through the state of higher ed in prison, the landscape of higher ed in prison, kind of defining what funding looks like, what the student population looks like, things that we all probably know. So I'll modify it because everyone here has taught in prison or been trained to teach in prison. So I can modify it on the go. And then I see the rest of the conversation. So 30, 40 minutes really is just that. So a conversation between us all. I have a couple little questions that we can work off of if we want. We can talk about them, we can not, we can talk about something else. And I'm really glad to have you all here. So thanks for coming. And let me just share my PowerPoint. Let's see. I promise I've done this 100 times. I teach online. You would think I'm better at it by now. Okay, everyone can see this? If someone can just give like a thumbs up. I can't see everyone either. Thumbs up. Lori, give me a thumbs up. Awesome. So it's great to meet you all and to hear about your backgrounds. So this little workshop is titled Prison Education Programs and Inside Out in the Age of Pell. And as I mentioned, I'm in Massachusetts and I'm at Endicott College, which is in Beverly, which is about 40 minutes north of Boston. And so today's conversation, the goal of the conversation is to provide a space for discussion, really. And so first, as I mentioned, I'll do a little presentation and then we will discuss. And I am just a facilitator. I'm here to talk with all of you, and that is the goal. So just a little outline, you will see I'm a little bit type A in my presentations, and I even included purple as the highlight color. Lori, I think that used to be your favorite color. I don't know if it still is. But there's a little purple in there. So a little bit about me. So on the left, I first got involved with Inside Out in 2016 as a student. So I was trained as a student in the state of Connecticut. I took a class at Garner Correctional Facility in Newtown, Connecticut, back in 2016. Then the middle is 2019. So about 3.5 years later, I became a trained instructor. So I went to Michigan, and as you can see, there I am with Lori, getting my certification. And now I'm an assistant professor in Massachusetts of criminal justice. And that last picture on the right is actually in the United Kingdom. So Hannah and Kate were trained with me, or trained the trainers, in 2019 in Michigan. So I went to see them, and Josie Phillips is also in that photo. She's at Durham. And then Fairleigh Gilmore, she is an Inside Out instructor in New Zealand. So went there, visited them, and talked about the different landscapes of corrections and higher ed and prison, and visited some prisons there with them. So that's my specific Inside Out background. Unfortunately, based just on circumstance, I was in a PhD program for 6 years and could not undertake an Inside Out class as a graduate student. And now I'm at an institution that does not have Inside Out. However, I've been trained with PD Green in New York. I was trained with New Jersey STEP, so I've been in prisons in New Jersey, and then I was trained with Inside Out. And just as the cookie sometimes crumbles, I actually have 2 prepared syllabi. And then about a week before I was supposed to go inside, the state or the facility said, oh, never mind, something came up, so you can't teach. So that's been my experience. And that's okay. So instead, the majority of my experience is trainings and then doing research on higher ed in prison. So specifically talking to instructors, so not just Inside Out, but instructors all across the nation who have taught in some capacity inside of a facility. So this could be a jail, a prison, a state or a federal facility. So I did a survey about a year ago with 156 instructors, did about 41 interviews to learn the challenges instructors face, to learn what training, if any, do some instructors go through. We're very fortunate. With Inside Out, we're walked through the history of criminal justice. We're walked through understanding the background of students, and not everyone receives that. My next button's not working. So now I'll just do a little overview of higher ed in prison. I can try to make the Pell and this stuff a little faster, so this is more of a conversation. But history of higher ed in prison. So correspondence courses through the mail began as early as 1950. So I know when I talk to instructors a lot who teach inside, they'll be like, oh, I did my training 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or some did it last year. I'm like, oh, like, when do you think it started? Just casual conversation. They're like, I think maybe in the 1990s. And what's interesting, even though Inside Out started, I believe in 1997, if memory serves me correctly, correspondence courses just through the mail with institutions began as early as 1950. And in 1965, that was the first time Pell Grants were available for students inside. And by 1972, we actually had across the US, whether it was one credit bearing class, or whether it was a certificate or any sort of credit exchange or course teaching exchange, we had 200 programs available. In 1994, Pell Grants were banned for incarcerated students. We know that 80s and the 90s looked really, really, really bleak and terrible for the criminal justice system, for the laws that were passed, for how that changed the climate. And estimates suggest that by 1997, only 8 programs remained across the nation. However, I'm here to talk about the happy news, the good stuff, that we're all here and everyone, mostly everyone, has been inside to teach. And in 2023, so July 1st, about a year ago, Pell Grant was reinstated. And we all sitting here have been trained, so we know that most people enrolled in higher education and prison programs are a specific population of non-traditional students who have experienced trauma, who have exposure to violence, which really informs how they experience the classroom and will also inform their ability to understand what the FAFSA form is, understand, what do finances mean, their financial literacy levels, all of that stuff. And so we're talking about mostly students over the age of 24 who are not the on-campus, 18-year-old who just graduated high school and they're fresh into college and, their parent is sitting at the computer helping them fill out the FAFSA, which I see a lot. We're talking about students who might not have seen a laptop or had access to a bank account or had money flowing for a certain period of time, who are now understanding how to navigate not only education, but the systems intertwined with accessing education. So the system of the government, the system of corrections, the system of higher education, lots of stuff all coming together that influences their experience. And estimates suggest that as a result of Pell Grants, over 760,000 incarcerated students are eligible to receive assistance for higher ed. So after almost 30 years of a ban on Pell Grants, it's looking like there will be increased access to things like certificates, associate's degrees, and bachelor's degrees. Now I have a couple, bear with me for the tables. Sometimes my researcher comes out and I go into settings like this with people and we're talking about education and they're like, what are you doing? But I think this is a good way to visualize what all this looks like. So we can see from this first table that we have a whole bunch of programs in California. We have a whole bunch of programs in Pennsylvania, which was many of you here, which is great. New York has a whole consortium of instructors and programs who teach for higher education in prison, followed by places like Illinois, Michigan, Massachusetts. So this is broken down by institutions and facilities. And the reason, so the next 3 slides are going to be graphics like this to understand at this time when Pell Grants are being reinstated, what programs exist. So how many instructors are we sending in? What are institutions doing? What facilities are allowing this? Because I think a big reason why this workshop, for example, exists is because we have all of these different people in different pockets of the nation doing specific types of education with common goals, which is providing education to students who are incarcerated. So I think it's really important to understand this broader landscape to then talk through or figure out networks of people to connect with, which we're lucky to have through Inside Out. And so as part of my dissertation, which won't focus on the dissertation much, just to provide this context, but I wanted to understand how many programs exist in the US. So how many programs do we actually have? What programs offer associates, bachelor's, master's degrees, or certificates? So I spent many months, many hours, lots of time trying to figure this out because we don't actually have a count. So Inside Out, so that's the second red bar, we have from the website from Lori and the team in Philly, a whole list and a beautiful map, honestly. It's really great. And you can click on it and you can see each institution, and you can also go through and see each correctional institution, and you can also see each university or college. So it really neatly shows you anywhere and everywhere that has offered a course. And I know that they update that really regularly. This table is probably not reflecting anything in the last 10 months if it's changed. So sorry, Lori, but it's almost accurate. And then the green on the left is the Vera Institute of Justice. So on their website, they have a whole program, the Unlocking Potential program, and they track higher education in prison. However, they are only accounting for Second Chance Pell from 2016 when the Experimental Sites Initiative happened until 2022. So they also have a breakdown by state and they have a breakdown by facility, but only for institutions who received funding from the Department of Education in the Experimental Sites Initiative. So a very specific count. Then we have the Alliance for Higher Education in Prison, which is the third purple bar. So what they do is they send out a survey to anyone who's essentially done anything in any prison or jail facility. And their data is based on who responds, but it's also not just higher education in prison. So that number includes reentry programs. It includes, things like workshops, carpenter programs, gardening programs, dog training programs, because if someone said that in their response, they're counting it as a response. So that likely overestimates what exists. And so that green bar is the data repository that I built that takes into consideration Vera's programs, Inside Out, the Alliance, only the programs that are considered post-secondary or higher education. And then what I also did, again, this took a long time, but I went on Google, and with these specific states and programs, I Googled every single different institution in every single state. And then if I could find a news article or a blog post or something the institution blasted out to like the college, I then cross-checked all this stuff to see like how many programs do we have? So it's somewhere ish between 300 and 400. And then somewhere between 400 and 500 correctional institutions in the US. All this to say, this field is awesome. I love the higher education in prison field, but there's so much that we don't know. And there's so much promise and there's so much to come in the future, because if we're thinking 300 and something institutions and over 400 facilities, that's so many lives, human lives that we can change with education. And it's so, so important. So I see this as a really good thing. And I think that number will only continue to expand. And then for types of credentials, there's lots of different instances, and I actually was just talking to Lori about this, because sometimes there's, like a floating class, which is still impactful. I'll get there in a second. But then sometimes there's credits, sometimes there's certificates, and sometimes there's degrees. So degree granting programs, most often associates. We can skip this one, and if anyone wants it, I'll send it to you. But this is just a breakdown of state by state who is offering what types of programs. So whether they have a certificate, associates, or a bachelor's program. And we can see, and this shouldn't come as a surprise, California is a huge state, and California is a really progressive state that provides a whole lot of education inside. And so they are very high above the bar in terms of what they're able to offer and what they do, because not only are they a big state with a whole lot of state universities, but they're also a state that really supports higher education in prison initiatives and always has. So yes.
Can we go back to that last slide? So that is not by far all 50 states. Like I noticed right away that Pennsylvania is not there.
Right. So it's what states I was able to gather in the data repository, and then it was a breakdown of like the most common certificate, associates, bachelors.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Oh, I also see a chat. I just don't want to miss if there's a question. Oh, can I share my data publicly? I'll I'll answer that question at the end. My dissertation is still not publicly available yet, and I would love to share this data publicly. So I'm working on figuring out how to do that. It's been a long time in the works because it also took me a really, really, really long time. So I want to be really careful about how I go about that, because I care very, very deeply about this work. And I guess that's my like protective territorial higher ed in prison side coming out, because it's so important for the students and for the instructors. And I don't want it to be used in a different way. So I'll get there in a second. So what this means is that we really do have a foundation for financially sustaining higher ed in prison programs. However, there has always been burdens on instructors and programs, right? Because these are the people who are navigating the on-the-ground challenges each week, in each class session, each semester. And now in thinking about Pell, we need to consider how to provide and sustain these programs, and also how to not only teach and train instructors and programs to succeed, but now we need to equip these people with how to walk students through the Pell process, which is what we're getting to now. So since 2016, we've had over 45,000 students enroll in Pell. And the third bullet is what I was getting to a second ago, where, we hear this narrative, and I have a PhD in criminal justice, and this is the thing that the people care about, is access to education leads to higher earnings and reduced recidivism. However, right, the big part that this narrative misses, and that's potentially the most important part of the narrative, is the personal, the pro-social, the cognitive benefits that higher education in prison offers. And part of my dissertation was talking to instructors to talk through this, because I would ask, did you offer the credit? Did you offer the degree? And people would say, no, hold on, right? So education itself is a right, and providing that education in this space is so important. So we shouldn't be basing education off of funding. However, right, there are real practical constraints to, if you don't have the funding, who can provide the education and how does it work? So I just want to keep in mind, like, we're presenting the nice, neat box of what is Pell and what does it do. However, the conversation at the end can absolutely, and I open the discussion of like, what is a real constraint, or is this going to work, or how can it work, or questions around that, because that's why we're all here, to kind of talk about that stuff. And so Pell is the largest federal grant program, which provides based financial funds. You have to be enrolled in an undergraduate course of study to apply, and you have to fill out the FAFSA every year. So fully transparent human being. I've received Pell Grants. I've filled out the FAFSA, and as someone who was a traditional college student who sat and asked someone to help them fill it out to understand the questions, it's very difficult. And I don't know if other people have had or have seen that experience. But while in theory, Pell is really great and a huge step forward, it absolutely comes with new challenges and new ways to understand how to make the most of this really fantastic opportunity. And so some other, restrictions or challenges include that you have to be in an approved prison education program. So this requires a partnership and an approval between the correctional facility, a qualifying school, along with an oversight entity. So like some sort of approving accreditation, for example, agency. And then you can't be delinquent on any of your loans, and you can't have previously gone into default on your loans. And this causes a lot of problems. And I've gone to a couple like workshops on this as well, because people who work as financial aid administrators are talking to people who direct these higher ed and prison programs. And there's this discourse of, well, hey, my student is, 55 years old and he wants to enroll in a program and he wants Pell, but he can't because he has a delinquent loan from 30 years ago. So there's a lot of discourse around how to change that and how to navigate that, because another practical constraint is truly understanding how to navigate that, along with technology, very simply put, and financial literacy. And so there has been approximately 18,000 Pell funded degrees, certificates since 2016. However, we actually don't have much data on 1 year of Pell reinstatement. So I spent many hours looking through both just on my own time and preparing for this workshop to try to understand, okay, who has received Pell Grants? How is that going? What is the process looking like? And there's actually not much data, which is telling as well. Again, which brings us back to, we are all people with a common goal, which is providing education. And there just remains some ever-present challenges on navigating how to best do that. And yes, Fresh Start program has helped with defaults. So there is the Fresh Start program, and it is really helpful. But I think that came back or was reinstated around the same time as Pell, when everyone was kind of negotiating, like, what does Pell look like, or and what the problems might be. And so this brings us to the good part, which is the open forum and discussion. And so I just added like a couple questions that I was thinking about that might be helpful. And if we want to talk about them, we can. If we don't, we can ignore them all. I'm fine with that too. But program funding and support structures. So for example, I've talked to people who say, hey, I have, X amount of donors and I'm going to keep running my program the way I've been running it for 15 years because Pell would actually create some nuances to how the program runs. Pell Grant applications. So if your higher education institution is offering a higher education in prison program, how do you do that? Who helps you with that? I've read through the whole thing, and it's kind of like the FAFSA. It's a good way to put it. Navigating student assistance and working with financial aid to help students fill out those forms. And then lastly, like any challenges or successes of anyone in here. So I will stop sharing my screen. And hopefully this was informative, helpful, and hopefully everyone's ready to kind of have a little chit chat together. So thanks for listening to my little spiel, and I'm excited to talk to all of you.
Now you can see everybody, yeah?
I can see everybody.
Okay, we probably should use the hand raise function and then feel free to call on people.
Sure. Does anyone want to do the first hand raise, or should I like pose a question? I can pose a question. I think maybe that'll be better. So has anyone in here applied for or gone through the Pell process? No. Yes. 2 people. So I'm sorry, and is your name, I forget, Neil?
Nigel, sorry.
Nigel, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, firstly, fantastic presentation, great data. I would love to get a hold of it too. So I'd like to follow up on that. And you've described the problem with Pell perfectly as well. We have not applied for Pell. You described California as being enlightened. It is in some respects, but the CDCR, the Department of Corrections, is not friendly towards inside out. And so we've had to we've been dissuaded from applying for Pell by both the CDCR in California and the sort of administrative nightmare that we've heard attends it as well. So we've avoided this, but we would like to expand. There are other institutions that would like to use Pell in the prison that we're working in, and so. But I would love to figure out a way to have inside out programs around the country start tapping into Pell. But again, we've encountered some resistance from the Department of Corrections.
And is that because they are already running a certain way where they like the way they're running and they don't want to change it, or is it something else?
Yeah, no, that their model is that they want Cal States to do BA programs in prisons around the state. Right. One size fits all. We started earlier, so we've been kind of grandfathered in, but we're sort of a quarantined exception at this point. But that's the situation that we're in.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple of people who are in a similar situation where they're thinking about or considering applying for Pell, and it's just like I've talked to someone who flat out said, we have great support, great funding, and it's just not something that we're going to do right now. So I'll do Sarah and then Trip.
So I haven't applied for Pell, so I feel badly raising my hand under false pretenses, but I was going to share my experience. I've been working with the Provost's office at the University of Florida simply to grant the inside students 3 credits, which is what my law students are going to be earning. And it turns out you can't go to the University of Florida and be an enrolled student if you have been convicted of a felony.
Oh, I have a whole so many feelings on that.
Yeah, me too. And so I said, why? And of course, it's a safety on campus concern. And I was like, I can relieve you of that concern. We're not going to be on campus. Like, seriously, get over yourselves. Can't even get them credit through my own university. So I am working with our community college, our local community college, who's been great and supportive. And I think we're going to work it out through there. But I'm beyond frustrated. Like, I can't even imagine overcoming a Pell hurdle and needing cooperation from the massive land grant University of Florida. I mean, I'm just super frustrated. So
yeah, I've definitely seen similar instances of this as well. And there are institutions who currently, like right now, have higher ed and prison programs. They offer degrees, they offer credits. They grant the students the credits, they grant them their transcripts, but then they're released and they can't even apply to or enroll in the college. So it's not only a challenge for you trying to get the credits, it's a challenge that people are facing, that they're saying, hey, we'll actually support this if it's in the prison, but we won't support it when people are released, which I wrote a whole letter to the Department of Education about, you know, if that shouldn't be a thing. But I know Trip had his hand raised.
Yes, please. So first off, thank you very much. This is phenomenal. You've done an amazing amount of work. So I belong to 2 organizations. One is Unlock Higher Ed, and the entire goal is to promote the the growth of these programs. Florida, I mean, there's some states that are just so adverse to it. But there are also states that are doing a phenomenal job. And so if we can kind of spread the success out, I know that the Alliance of Higher Education in Prison and my organization, FICGN, will work with facilities, will work with universities in order to help them with the process of developing their Pell application, going to the DOCs, going through the security trainings and whatnot. Something that we ran into at my facility, Dr. Omi Hodwitz put together a Inside Out program to start through the University of Idaho. And it took a lot to get that going, but some of the problems that we ran into in converting that with Pell is that it wasn't degree seeking. So it was one-off classes here and there. And because it wasn't a comprehensive degree program, Pell didn't qualify in the same way. And so she had to create a separate PEP, prison education program, where the Inside Out program was a part of that. So worked with the greater the university to create a degree seeking program that then Inside Out supplemented or was a part.
Yeah, it's really complex and they don't make it easy. Back when the regulations were being passed, there were a lot of similar workshops to this where it was people who were directors of programs understanding like how do I go through the process. And I know the Vera Institute of Justice has a whole set of recommendations. But Trip, we should also connect because I know Terrell really well and I'd love to connect further with you. So Coraline.
So I'm in Pennsylvania.
I don't know, Paul probably should talk before me, but I'm going to talk from an advocate point of view. And so here in Michigan, to offer a degree offering program, you have to be with the Michigan Consortium for Higher Education in Prisons, which is a small group right now, but they're trying to become a 501(c)(3). So we're in contact with a lot of those institutions. Some are offering a Pell Grant, but a lot of them are private institutions who have their own funding and they're funding a degree program. But I was just recently in contact with Patrick Brown, who is with Michigan College Access Network. And as we were talking, they're trying to improve college access to everyone who is incarcerated, informally incarcerated here in Michigan. And he never even heard of Inside Out Prison Exchange Program. So, you know, when he's talking about trying to improve that access, because right now it's like 1,000 people in programs in Michigan where there's 3,000 on a waiting list. So, you know, as an advocate and of course, former Inside Out student, my push is always Inside Out. And in fact, and so trying to get more funding in regards to more programming in Michigan and then making it easier. But I know Paul can probably talk more about where University of Michigan Dearborn, you know, lies in their decision making in regards to Pell Grant. But that's just from an advocate point of view and what we're doing to bring more college access to folks inside of Michigan.
Yeah, thanks, Tori. I was going to say the same thing. Tori might be answering the question that I was going to raise. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of light to shed on how you actually get it done, because that's what I was hoping to learn from this meeting, because we've experienced some frustration here I've experienced it both at the university level and at the MDOC level. The university level, even in terms of trying to get credits for Inside Out is one thing, still haven't succeeded in doing that. And then trying to get the university to commit to supporting a program, taking advantage of Pell to try to provide classes to incarcerated students that would then, you know, serve as a pathway or pipeline even to our own university. That's been difficult. The most progress I made was before the pandemic. We got actually selected by our MDOC as a potential partner for that Pell Grant. That was when they were still doing the pilot programs. And then the university basically just backed down because I think they just they discussed it internally at a level, above my level, and decided it was just too much commitment. In other words, like having to go to the prisons, having to do the FAFSAs, having to do all the foundational work to actually even offer classes or get students with Pell Grants in prison. They just didn't do it. And I haven't been able to get, and then since pandemic, with MDOC and with our university, it's basically almost like a restart. Even though Pell is now, it's no longer, a special program. It's available to anyone. It's across nationwide, but so I've been trying to get this conversation restarted again at the university, and also to work with others in the state who are working with MDOC. It feels like, I mean, the other issue I was made aware of is that for us as a state institution, which is has a fairly high price tag because we're the University of Michigan, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense for incarcerated students to use their Pell Grant dollars on classes with us, even if we were able to offer them. So we've been trying to think about is how do we work with some of our community college neighbors or two-year college neighbors on programs where maybe they can offer credits inside, and then we can offer, pathways from the 2-year degree to the 4-year university for those who come out. So but I don't know if anyone else has had any experience with trying to work across these different layers, because each bureaucracy is kind of its own. I mean, as we all know, even from doing Inside Out. So unfortunately, so Tori, yeah, I'm hoping that maybe if we bring a statewide conversation on this and we have MDOC at the table, maybe we can make some headway on it. I think now I can probably get some U of M Ann Arbor people involved in the conversation. In the past, I don't think they had any interest in it because they see themselves as a flagship university, and this was not seen as a a clientele, if you will, that was high on their priority list.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. So 2 things I will quickly say, and then I'll go over to Joe. First, I'm sorry that I did not solve your questions or provide you an answer. But that's my first thing, because that's kind of why I wanted to bring us all together, because I've heard these frustrations and these challenges so often that when I saw this call for workshops, I was like, maybe we should just try to get people on a Zoom, because so many people have had similar like bureaucratic real challenges of, if anyone's ever looked at the Pell regulations and the different steps. So first you have to fill out a form. Then in your prison education program, which is, they call it like the PEPs, you also have to have that form filled out with the Department of Correction. And it's a pretty lengthy form with a bunch of questions that like no one really wants to fill out. And it's going to take you a lot of time and a lot of thought. So if we're thinking about the priority list, kind of like Paul was just saying, it's not number 1 really for anyone. So you're filling out these forms, and then you also have to find an accreditation agency. So an oversight entity is what it's called. And so this is then, Tori, it was so good to see you. But this then makes it, there's a 3-prong approach to filling out these forms and getting all these people on board. And it's hard to even, if you're trying to email someone from a bureaucracy, to get them to answer, to have a meeting, or to settle on, a similar answer or solution. So that's the first thing I would say. That was basically my I'm sorry. And then the second thing I would say is, Paul, the other thing you mentioned about state universities having a high price tag and Pell actually doing students a disservice because it will charge them a higher price. I talked to about 40 people who teach inside, and a good percentage of them talked through exactly that, saying, we have this solid funding. We've had it this program has existed for 10 plus years. And we're actually not going to tap into Pell because right now our registrar created an agreement when Pell was banned for incarcerated students that as a college, we believe that education is important, education should be accessible, and the registrar chooses to waive the fee or to allow the credits and to give students a transcript with some sort of other way that the money funnels in. And so this kind of doesn't allow for that to happen. So lots of really practical constraints. So Joe.
Yeah, it's really I'm very glad to be here today. I don't really have a lot to add in terms of insight.
And without planning it, we stepped into the breach when all of these other programs fell away because Pell didn't exist. And so I think in lots of places we were able to get inroads, but now things are shifting. And who could have predicted any of this, really? Ashley, do you have any final things you want to say to wrap up? And I'm wondering too, how you would feel about sharing your slides?
Yeah, I can share my slides. I'd be happy to. I also had my contact information on them that I didn't show because I was excited to talk to everyone. So I felt it wasn't necessary. But in wrapping up, I think everything we've all heard today is probably what we've all heard before, right? Like none of this is new. And I think like Lori said, it shows the evolving nature of higher ed in prison. And I don't know what this means, right? So I took a class in 2016, right? And even from then till now, so that was 8 years ago. And I've been in this space for 8 years as a student, and then I worked with Inside Out and I did some volunteer work. And now it's just so different, right? So like I know a couple of people who have been in this space for a long time, but it's even navigating like, hey, who has the experience, who cares, who's in it for what? And I think there are real practical constraints of, well, I want to get my enrollment up, so maybe I can apply for Pell, but then what does that mean for students, right? Because numbers are numbers, and I'm a qualitative researcher, not a quantitative researcher, because right, the numbers, they tell an important story and they tell us one story. And if enrollment goes up, right, that looks good for attention, that looks good for enrollment, that looks good for budgets. However, if we're thinking about the human lives and we're thinking about the students who are involved in this, and we kind of go away from the budgetary side and we think about these people whose lives have been entangled in the criminal justice system, whose lives have been full of racialized, marginalized experiences, who this experience, the experience of education and this opportunity can be life-changing. Well, that the numbers are not actually what we care about. We care about like how to provide this to them. And if we can get this to them, and if we can interact with them and help them have a sense of peers who support them and educators who support them, right? That's, I think, what many people are in this for. And I think kind of like Lori said, when Pell was banned, right, it was easier to get in. It was easier to have these programs because people stopped doing it. And now things change. So the landscape changes, the support, the funding changes. And as with anything, right, there are trade-offs, because I do not want to end this saying Pell is bad. I would never say that. I think Pell is fantastic, and it shows support at a federal level, which is amazing, which provides so many opportunities. However, it's very dependent on the program, the class, the population of students, the state, the facility. There's no homogeneous way we should or can approach this. And I think being really mindful that there's always been barriers, right? We can sit here and talk about the challenges, but they're always going to be there in different ways. And it's kind of just learning and reminding ourselves that we're here to provide education. Us in this room have been trained, or this virtual room, in Inside Out, and we know how to do that. And it's kind of working together to figure out how to achieve the common goal, even though there are those frustrations in the way. So I think that's kind of how I would end this. I don't know if that's helpful, but hopefully it is. So thanks also to all of you for being here.
That was fabulous. Ashley, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Lori, and thanks everyone who came.
Yep. Okay. See you all soon.